So Audrey, that tree I was telling you about?
Just so you know, I've been working very hard back there, not just been socializing. It's now, so an update, because everybody might get text messages, the video is going to be live, however, it's going under the planning board event. That's the only way we can fix it for right now. There are larger issues to be considered for later time.
All right.
But we'll fix it later, we can go and just look.
Bruce?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah,
Okay, good. All right, good. Welcome, everyone, to the Town of Camden Select Board meeting for August 20th, 2019. I almost said 2020. And I'm a little ahead of myself. Just FYI, we are being, especially for those of you here, we are being live recorded and online, so keep your comments the way I tried to do, nice and clean. But
I just wanted to make a comment. My husband watches at home, and last, I can't remember which meeting, but he said he couldn't hear people who were in the audience.
yeah, you can't, Eleanor. That's one of the reasons why we have to ask people to come up to the mic and speak, because speaking from the audience does not work. You are correct. You are correct. And to that end, just FYI, everybody out there who's looking in YouTube for what we're videoing tonight is listed as a planning board meeting. It should be listed as a select board meeting. So that's on YouTube, please. Now to our agenda. We would like to start the meeting, as always, with any public input on non-agenda items. Ms. Grove.
And for the sake of the video, my name is Karen Grove. I am a resident of the town of Camden, and I've come here because it came to my attention recently, reading an article on Village Soup, that conversations had gone on between town officials and the Board of Trustees of the Camden Public Library. I was disappointed to see that neither entity understood the responsibility they have been charged with in relation to Harbor Park. I feel you're walking dangerously close to destroying a historic Olmsted Park. The Americans with Disabilities Act is very clear on what would happen if you were to remove or alter any part of the park. And altering the park that's the salient point here. So to get to the points that may happen, could happen, probably will happen if you change the park. If the park is changed or altered in any way, no matter how minor, the entire park must be brought into ADA compliance under federal law. Some of those, our paths would have to be adjusted to 3 feet wide minimums. Turnout pads will be required throughout the park on pathways. The slope of the park itself will need to be re-landscaped to align with ADA compliance, which means it will probably be lowered, almost flattened. Entrances are adjusted to meet ADA accessible requirements. If there are events at Water's Edge, which is done at least twice in the summer, the Rotary Club and the Windjammer Weekend, Permanent viewing platforms, pads, will be required. Construction material of all pathways and turnout pads will have to meet federal regulations as written by law. The cost of all of this will be on the backs of the Camden taxpayers. Again, this is specifically written into the law. The federal government will not be paying for this. Now, the second item that I wanted to talk about is at the head of the harbor near the dam outlet. That is dredged every 10 years. This is done due to the silt that washes down the river, usually after major storms, making its way over the dam. The cost of dredging the last time it was done in 2013, when Park Marine did the job, was $30,000 a week for 3 weeks, totaling $90,000. If you were to remove these dams, the increased cost of dredging and timeline, even by removing 2 or 3, it will increase the cost of dredging and the timeline necessary to keep the head of the harbor up to expected standards for commercial dockage, dinghy docks, and possibly the schooner landings at Harbor Park. Now, the commercial landings are also federally mandated, so you're going to have to manage with that. We're already seeing that some of the dinghy docks are being compromised. They're getting to have very low water there because there has been too much silt because of the damaged dams. There's too much silt coming over. So it's going to have to be dredged before that 10-year guideline comes up. So if you move it up and it's done every 4 years, the estimated time during that 10-year, the estimated cost during that 10-year period will be somewhere in the area of $250,000. Okay, now, back in 1998, and I know some of you were either in college or high school or not living here, or so, there was an attempt by a few businessmen in Camden to lower the hill on Harbor Park and remove trees from the park and the amphitheater. Local concerned citizens moved to stop this by informing voters of the repercussions of these changes. The voters took the decision out of the hands of the planning board, the board of trustees, and the library, and the select board, and brought it to a town-wide vote. This was one of the largest, I think the second largest voter turnout in that decade. The plan to redo the park was voted down 1,500 to 500 voters. It was an enormous turnout. And the Bangor Daily News talked about it in an article on July 16th, and they said these men attempted to spend $560,000 to redo the park. So that gives you some idea of what would happen if you tried to redo it today, okay? The grassed-in areas overlooking Camden Harbor were designed by the landscape firm of Frederick Law Olmsted and Fletcher Steele. The Olmsted firm was known for its creation of New York Central Park, and Steele is renowned for landscape designs at scores of the nation's most famous estates. In rejecting the trustees' proposal, residents expressed their fear that the proposed changes represented an affront to the historic nature of the park and the legacy of the great landscape architects who created them 70 years ago. Now, a little bit further to that, I got on the phone about 3 or 4 months before that vote came down, or before we pushed it to a vote, and I called ADA and in Boston, the regional office. And apparently, landscape architects all over the country had been looking at this, waiting to see what we would do. And I wasn't aware of that, but when I called ADA, the man who answered the phone, I said, "Hello, my name's Karen Grove, I live in Camden, Maine, I want to talk about a park here." He said, "I wondered if anybody from your town would ever bother to make this telephone call." I had chills, truly. It was such a surprise, but he was very nice. We talked for about a half an hour, and he told me what would happen if we altered the park in any way. And I said to him, "Why would you care? It's a little park." He said, "I don't. We don't. What we want to do is make an example out of this historic park, so we can go after Central Park in New York, White Park in Chicago, and all of the bigger parks across the United States. I said, what if we fight back? He said, you can't afford it. So I said, well, who makes this decision? He said, I do. It was all pretty chilling, the phone call, but he was very nice.
Sure.
He also offered me the phone number of the lawyer who actually wrote the document that was handed off to the congressman who presented this for passage. And he was a lawyer in California. I called the guy right away. He got on the phone. He verified what the man from ADA said. That night, I went to a planning board meeting, stood up here, and spoke to this. In the room was a woman by the name of Patricia O'Donnell, who is the leading authority on homestead parks in the country. She had been hired by the library trustees to redo the park. And they made their presentation, then I stood up and made mine. The chairman of the planning board said, somebody in this room is lying, and I want to know who. He was furious. His face was scarlet. And Patricia O'Donnell stood up, pointed at me, and she said, this woman has done her homework. She's absolutely right. So there you are. That's what I wanted to talk to you all about.
Aaron,
I've left a
thank you.
copy of this with Bob Falciani and with Audra.
Well, thank you very much for coming, and believe me, wherever the stages that we're in, all this input will be taken into
I hope you take it
consideration.
all in.
We have to. We have no choice.
Thank you.
So we're not concerned. But thanks for taking interest in coming to us. We really appreciate it. Any other public comments, items that are not on the agenda? Not seeing any, we will move to the approval of the board minutes from August 6, 2019. Are there any comments on the board meeting minutes, board members?
Believe it or not, I have one. I was absent, not present and absent. I was here in spirit. But it says both that I'm present and absent, so that's it.
You can also use the term out to lunch.
Yeah, exactly. All night.
Is that the only one comment you have?
That's my one.
Anybody
comment.
else? No? Motion?
Move to approve the board minutes from August 6, 2019.
Second.
All those in favor? 3, 0, 1.
I wasn't here.
Yeah, I know.
As
Cool.
reestablished.
Select board reports. Taylor?
Nothing for me this evening.
I wasn't
Alice?
sure if you were in a center, if you like to skip over me.
I do sometimes. Yeah, I do that. I just try to keep you all on edge.
I like it. Yes. Ironically enough, this afternoon I had a lovely chat with the National Association of Olmsted Designed Parks. And we're grappling with many of the same issues that there are thousands of Olmsted designed public spaces all over the country. And I'm on a mailing list for people who are interested in that association. They provide all kinds of resources, and they've done a truly amazing digitization project, which is useful to us in many different ways, aside from just Harbor Park. They have plans for the public landing that never came to fruition. There are apparently the original idea for condos over at Wayfair belonged to Mrs. Bach and the Olmsted brothers, as controversial as that turned out to be. But she did know that people would want to live there. It's really a truly amazing resource, and it's been fun to be in contact with people who are really thinking thoughtfully about this. The whole vision of Frederick Law Olmsted was, and his vision for these public parks was to bring people closer to nature and to give people an equal opportunity, independent of your social status, to give people an equal opportunity to interact peacefully with nature and to foster an appreciation for that. And certainly that is a value that has carried through to everyone in Camden. So they have all kinds of different experts. They've invited us to submit, they have a quarterly newsletter, and they encourage us to submit the sort of just the idea of what we're grappling with the seawall and fish passage, and they can put that in their newsletter. And then through the sort of loose association of contacts that they have, they felt like that would be a good resource for us and that people would be interested and they would contact us. It was funny because when I first spoke with them, they said, oh, well, we'll put you right over to our activism department. And this sounds similar, you know, there's something in New Jersey going on with a traffic circle. And then I gave her my email address and it had the .gov at the end. And she goes, oh, you're calling from the town. Oh, that's interesting. And it, you know, they're used to sometimes getting calls from people that are like, my town is going to destroy a public park. So anyway, that was positive. Another thing, this is just a sort of a side note, with all of the discussion that's gone on around the noise of certain businesses, I've had a lot of people contact me happy that, you know, that the select board was strong in our sort of defense of a business's right to, you know, to do what they do. And a lot of people appreciative that Cuzzies in this case does still exist and is a place for people to go. But also a lot of concern about what maybe has been lost in Camden. And it caused me to look a little bit more carefully at the noise ordinance, which I remember at the time, I wasn't on the select board, but I definitely voted for it. It was all well explained. But I guess I didn't totally realize that there were no exceptions to the 11 o'clock limit, that after, it's not that if you have a special amusement permit, you're allowed to exceed that 65 decibels. It's in order for anybody, no matter what district you're in town, in order to exceed the 65 decibels, you have to have a special event permit for that specific day. And, you know, and it occurred to me that essentially when we passed that ordinance, we were banning live music in Camden after 11 p.m. And I recognize the intention, especially for residential districts, but it does seem when we talk about the wanting vibrancy in Camden, wanting year-round families and wanting all of these things to go on, to say that, you know, everybody kind of has to whisper after 11 o'clock, even in the downtown business district. I mean, I'm thinking, you know, like the Cuzzies, Peter Rott, sort of all the, you know, right on the harbor there. I really do think we need to take a harder look at that because it doesn't jive with a lot of the other things that we're saying. Another quick thing, I watched the Parks and Rec meeting, or actually just listened to it. But I was glad to hear the discussion of the swings on at Lake Beach. And at first I was like, I can't believe they're saying this. They're saying not even to have the baby swings anymore. And then a few more people spoke, and I was like, oh, that's very good, right? I don't know even who was speaking the whole time, but I would just want to add my voice, and I guess you're the Parks and Rec liaison?
Yes.
That Lake Beach is like this gem. And, you know, having young kids going there, we have so much fun there. There is something for everybody. There's, well, sort of. It would be a great place for more playground equipment. You see other places with slides built into the slope. There is a pretty flat area on top there. It's similar in virtually every way to Walker Park, which is a huge attraction. So, I mean, I really think that is a place that we should be investing in, and definitely don't want to see us pull back from the swings altogether. I think the wood chips, if it's truly just a case, and I feel like we've finally gotten confirmation that it is just the wood chip issue that kept us from having regular swings.
Correct.
I mean, that's just,
It's surmountable.
it is totally surmountable. I mean, it's just insane. It's almost insane. But, so I was happy to hear that being taken into consideration. Just want to lend my personal
Sure.
voice
Good
to.
idea. I think Parks and Rec is on the same page, to tell you the truth, when the conversation was heading toward solving that problem. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Ms. Jenna?
I don't have a lot, but I do want to just echo what Allison said. About the noise situation downtown. I think that talking about vibrant downtown and talking about having no ability for any kind of live music without jumping through all kinds of hoops really is contradictory, especially when we had the manager of the Bayview collection here talking, I mean, people are looking to have fun downtown, and I think that we really do need to re-examine that ordinance, and I think whether that means creating something like an arts district or a cultural district or something of that nature in a very small area. Of course, I'm thinking of Bayview Street, but I think it really is a conversation that warrants having and revisiting.
Okay. Audra? Okay, the only other thing I would mention from my perspective was there was a meeting last week with MDOT with some homeowners on Route 1, the project from State Park to the Lincolnville line. The design has been updated quite well, actually. It's done for all intent and purpose. But just so you know where the project is today is they have assessed all of the homeowners' properties along that stretch for the potential acquisition of either permanent rights-of-way or temporary rights-of-way, which are required for construction. The homeowners will be, then that was a consultant that did that. The homeowners will be hearing then in about October directly from MDOT on those negotiations with each homeowner. And their plan is a bit aggressive in my mind, but they're planning to bid the project late this year for commencement next year. And when it's a little aggressive.
So bid late this year?
Yeah, in November, December, which I honestly, first quarter. But regardless, if they do start construction, their plan is to start, the construction plan is developing. They're going to start with the 2 bridges, one at Great Brook, which is way up Route 1, about where I live, by the Lincolnville line. That will be a 24/7 one-way for a period of time while they're preparing that bridge. In parallel, at the same time, they're going to do Stonebrook Hill. Springbrook. Yeah, it's called Stonebrook. Springbrook Hill, there's a lot of stones there. Springbrook Hill at the same time. But the good news there is they have changed some of the plans. They are going to have constant 2 lanes available for that element of Route 1. So that's the status on Route 1 North.
Can you explain to me how they replace a bridge and keep 2 lanes of traffic?
Yeah, they do. They're going to put a lane where old Route 1 was, which would be to the east side of Route 1, which is towards the ocean.
I've heard that before. It still doesn't make sense to me how, because there isn't a bridge there now.
There isn't.
So they build a new bridge?
They build a temporary, yep. And then the land is there because past the bridge. They build a temporary bridge and they'll have 1 lane open and then they'll do their work on the far side and do a switcheroo. But I was surprised because I've never seen it done that way before because it's very difficult and very expensive, honestly.
How do they build a temporary bridge? And what do they do with it when they're done?
Take it down.
And is it like a,
It's cribbing.
sorry, I don't.
Big, no, it's actually, it can be steel, it can be wood, but I imagine it's going to be steel cribbing from the ground up to bridge an area. It's very commonly done in construction. Like I said, it's not cheap, not easy, and it's
They
not
explained
permanent.
this to me too when we had the meeting about and it's such a pristine little stream and.
It is, we'll have to watch it. But other part of it, I want to be cautious of keeping track of it because we have Route 1 downtown drainage from Stop and Go to Sea Dog, right? Down to
I
Sea
think it
Dog.
goes
Past
past
it.
there as well.
So slightly past it, so, I just worry a little bit if those two could overlap at all for a traffic and business perspective. We have to just
Be
watch it.
trapped in camp.
Everybody has to stay here. But anyway, that's all that I have on the select board reports. Audrey, you said you had nothing?
No.
Okay. We have a consent agenda. Just before I go into the consent agenda, there is one item being deleted from the consent agenda, and that is the wedding in a public space for September 17th at Harbor Park. That item is being deleted. So on our consent agenda tonight, we have literally 5 items, and they are request from Mid-Maine Sports Car Club to close Chestnut Street on Sunday, September 1st from noon to 3 for the 18th annual Camden Foreign Car Show. Secondly, the consideration by us of renewal of the Vittler licenses for A Little Dream Bed and Breakfast, Mariners Restaurant, and Sea Dog Brewery. Thirdly, we have a proposal from our code enforcement officer, our CEO, to just modify our fee structure for permits in the town to include a line for a flat fixed fee of $50 for non-structural projects. The fourth item would be the approval of the Village Green on September 20th in recognition of POW/MIA Day. That's considered to be a very brief presentation of names lasting 30 minutes, maximum an hour. And lastly, with the approving of a wedding in a public space on October 10th, 2020, at the end of Marine Avenue, at the overlook at the end of Marine Avenue. Are there anybody against any one of these consent items on the consent agenda? Yes?
I'm not necessarily against it, but I do think that the Marine Ave wedding approval, especially since it's so far off in the distance, October
10th.
of 2020, right?
2020, yeah.
Yeah, it is a long way off.
It's
I
a
mean,
long
that's,
way out.
I'm, in
That's 2019.
No, it's 20.
No wonder I was thinking 2020.
theory, I'm supportive of people being able to
I
use that, but I think we do need to,
propose,
talk about the
I
details.
propose we take it off the consent agenda and off the agenda period, because I'm sorry, I misread that as October 10th, 2019. That, yeah, I would agree. So I would revert to, there are 4 items on the consent agenda excluding all weddings in public spaces. Are there any objections to the 4 items?
No.
Not hearing any, they are hereby adopted. Going to item 5 then, which would be discussion on our issue with downtown trash cans.
We need more.
Don't have very many.
We need more.
And I guess that's the fundamental issue here, is a concern with the amount and locations of both recycle and general trash in general, causing all kinds of debris to be flying all over the place because it's coming out of trash cans.
yeah, and yeah, there just aren't enough. I would say there are quite a few, and I do know that it's a difficult job and that people abuse them and put personal trash and all kinds of things. And that having more would mean allocating additional resources to that, whether it be, more Parks and Rec staff time on the weekends or more Public Works staff time and more money for actual trash cans. But I know it's a little early in the year to be allocating select board contingency to something. If we really needed to, maybe the Public Works budget can find it in it. But you just can't go very far. There are areas where sometimes there's only a recycling container, and then, of course, that causes people to want to put trash in there.
Sure.
I oftentimes, during the weekends, see them overflowing. If you go to pick, our one of the main things would be just our town parking lots, in order to comply with our own ordinance that we just passed, and actually state law. We do, in all of these major public gathering spaces, we do need to have a trash can, actually sometimes several. So like the Knox Mill parking lots,
Yes.
those don't, there's a dumpster that is locked, that doesn't appear to be ours, but there just aren't, you go to pick up, if a good Samaritan wants to pick up trash, then they have nowhere to put it. And you can see people all over the place, like down at the public landing too. There's so much trash that gets put in the lobster traps. And I kind of think, I like the idea of that because I think it's somebody that's desperate and trying to make sure the trash doesn't fly away. But I have personally any number of places in mind. But maybe if we could ask Dave St. Laurent if that could be a conversation, maybe, I don't know if it would be, if there's a specific committee that would want to get involved in that, or if that's something we can just do.
Why don't
Or
we-
if any, I don't know if anybody, I know I'm only one person.
I've actually heard that complaint, not a complaint, but that noted before, that more trash cans would just be, at the very least, convenient for people, which I think solves a lot of the problems you're talking about. It's convenience, and, I mean, to me, that should be simple. It shouldn't have to even go to a committee. We should just
I would
put more
agree.
trash
I
cans
would
out
agree.
there.
This is operational. Could we just have Dave take a look at it? Now, he's just started this week, our new Public Works Director, for those you don't know. Maybe have him take a look at the whole process and look at a per can cost kind of thing, and then we can determine a proposal. to
Yeah,
put-
we'll sit down and look at some locations, and I think, Allison, those are pretty obvious one, so,
Yeah.
you know, we can look at other
Yeah.
areas and maybe
Yeah.
figure out what's getting hit particularly.
Yeah, the weekends were by far and away the worst. And I have to believe some of it's because of people going through and taking the trash from their campsite or someplace, and then just dumping in the trash, which they should. I mean, they should dump it someplace. But yeah, let's just take a look at mapping it out and see what we can do and get a price tag to it.
I mean, I do think this is
Really
an area where the
determine-
public can be really helpful, because no matter how much somebody just goes around, it's like, oh, maybe here, there are so many, a lot of the time when I'm walking around, I think, it's really only the experience sometimes of holding a piece of trash in your hand while you're walking,
Trying to get rid of it.
looking for a trash
Yeah.
can that helps you realize where they should be, and so,
Right.
Take a dog for a walk around town.
And by the way, this is the kind of thing we could start with Plan A. We have to go to Plan B. We can always do that,
Mm-hmm.
too. It doesn't have to be the one brush for 10-year plan kind of thing. So I think you should look at it as, let's start with this, whatever this is.
And give
and
our
then-
new Public Works Director an opportunity to meet
Perfect.
some people, too.
Perfect. I love the idea.
do
I
we
think it's
have a
great.
map of all the trash cans, do you think? Like, do they have?
Oh, This is not
GIS
Singapore.
Overlay by noon tomorrow.
This is,
Not.
No, are you sure?
I'm not certain.
There's not a trash can.
Well, if we didn't have the streetlights in a GIS layer, I doubt we have the trash cans.
that's right.
Oh, I wasn't saying GIS on your name necessarily, doesn't have to go in the like CAI yet, but,
So let's do that, and then.
although I like that idea.
Overdue, that,
I can do two. Let's,
That would be the easiest way to do it, though,
It
nowadays.
would be I would love that.
well, we're running out of summer, so let's try to bring it back as soon as, back to
But
us as soon as possible.
And also winter is the other, I mean, that's the
Oh,
other
yeah.
point I would make, is that I know it's
Yeah.
annoying to deal with the snow
Yeah,
and the trash
The
cans,
plows.
but, I mean, do we have to take away so many trash cans? I think we stop recycling in the winter too. I've noticed those go away. And it would just be good to get a sense of like, what kind of resources does it, what kind of message are we sending first?
Let's,
And
let's,
then-
let's do a 12-season look, just to see what he says and feedback. He has a lot of experience in Rockland, so does.
A lot of
And
experience
Rick
with
too, I
trash.
mean, Rick,
A lot of experience
Right,
with
yeah.
trash. Cool, let's do that.
I mean, Rick too, I'm sure has a
Oh,
lot of.
absolutely. Rick, I was going to
Tell
say,
you a lot about those trash cans.
yeah, a hell of a lot. With that, let's do that and come back hopefully in the next month or so and let's chat about it again. Next, we're going to an update on the tannery cleanup.
All right, so I know it's been a little quiet on the tannery front, on, I think, the public's end, but not on my end. Last time I was here, I think, was when we started talking about the solid waste on the bank of the river and the concerns. And we had a consultant look at it. He also reviewed all the old Phase 1 and Phase 2s that were done by DEP and Ransom and Summit. He identified some gaps in the data that was collected. So we retained Siler Services to come up and kind of assess the site, see what needs to happen to try to fill in those gaps. We had a great on-site meeting back at the end of July, and Steve Dyer from Ransom was on the site. Bob, I know you were there for a little bit. Allison, you were there for a little bit, and I think you showed up a little bit later. And it was a good walkthrough. And interesting, it was brought to our attention that we likely wouldn't be able to use our cleanup funds to, if we found material in the riverbank. I had then reached out to EPA, Alan Peterson, told them what the issue was, explained the data gaps that we had, and that we really want to make sure when we cap this and clean up this site and redevelop in whatever fashion we do, that we're not missing anything, and that there's no risk to public health or from environmental contamination or from solid waste that DEP always said it was. So Alan Peterson, he's the project manager for EPA and for this project. He was ecstatic, honestly, that we were delving into this as deep as we were. And he said, I really reached out to him to see if we can use the funds, cleanup funds in that area, should we find something. And, I went to him saying the town was prepared to fund some further assessments on that riverbank area. And he turned around and said, well, actually, I think I can probably find some, what we call targeted assessment funds to send to Camden to do this right, which was wonderful to hear. I have since, he asked our consultant, Brian Slacky from Seiler Services, to develop an assessment sampling plan. Brian did that. DEP's been involved in this as well. DEP did ask if we could include assessment of what is now termed forever chemicals, right? The PFAS, the PFAS is, and we said, sure, we would do that. We came up with a plan, sent it to DEP or EPA. EPA said, okay, looks good. I got to get this through the contract folks. I finally got an email at the end of last week. DEP was okay with the sampling plan, the assessment plan. Steve Dyer from Ransom looked at it, and he was okay with it. And turns out, last Friday, Alan said he was sending it to contracts, which means I assume, and I sent him an email today asking if I can get a guarantee that they're going to fund it. He didn't get back to me, but based on the email, certain that the EPA is going to fund an assessment and a sampling of that riverbank, and we're going to look at the soils, we're going to look at pore water samples, we're going to look at groundwater sampling for PFAS and PFAS up on the site as well as down below, so we can fill in the missing data gaps. And should we find any contamination in that riverbank area, we will be able to use the cleanup funds not only in the area that we've always been talking about redeveloping the site, but we could also use it on the other area, riverbank. And so happens we could also probably remove, while we're doing it, remove some solid waste as part of that. So it's great news that the feds are going to pay for this, and we don't even have to actually, we don't have to hire anyone. This is targeted assessment funds. DEP hires their contractor will come in, do the work. Brian Slacky from Seiler Services will be up on site
DEP or
overseeing.
EPA?
What's that?
Did you say DEP or EPA?
EPA, sorry,
Okay.
EPA. And Brian Slacky from Seiler Services will be on site when the contractors are up there, overseeing the collection, and we'll be doing some pore water samples, some core samples of soil, and we'll also be doing a handful of trench excavations, which are generally about, a bucket width on a mini excavator, and they'll run from anywhere from like 5 to 15 feet in length, and generally about 5 feet deep. And then that material will go back in. Hopefully it's clean. We'll go back in that spot. I spoke with DEP, the Land and Water Bureau, on the permitting of that. No permits are needed because it's part of a cleanup and an assessment. So they just want an erosion control plan from me, which I'll be working on that. We don't need an engineer to do that. I can do that myself. DEP's fine with that. Alan did say it would take about a month to get through contracts, so is what it is. But I would suspect by the early to mid-October, we'll have an EPA contractor up here on site assessing the riverbank area and some other areas that we felt had some gaps in the assessments.
The overall time period to actually do the work would be 2 weeks?
Oh, they'll be in and be done likely in a day or two.
Okay.
The sampling and assessment.
Whenever they start, yeah.
And then that gets all
Yep,
sent off
and then
somewhere.
they just will do a data dump back to Brian Slacky from Seiler Services, and then Brian Slacky would work with Ransom to integrate that into their cleanup plan.
Great.
That's where we are.
Thanks, Jeremy.
That's
Thank you very
wonderful.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Scenario news.
Solvable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking we're going to end up having to spend $10,000 or $20,000 on
Easily,
doing some
easily.
assessments, and we're not going to have to spend any.
That's the great news.
Feeling like it's getting nailed down.
Thanks, James.
Closing the gap.
Cool.
Okay.
Stay there.
Yeah.
Because the next item is to review the
Marijuana?
draft of the
right.
marijuana
All right.
licensing ordinance. And by the way, just FYI to everybody watching and talking, apparently there were a few the package that's in your packet has been slightly modified by our attorney. And Jeremy, you can highlight those if you would, so everybody's on the same page in terms of the draft we're dealing with.
Can you just grab this
What you want?
remote for the?
Sure.
The paper copy you handed us is the.
Yes,
revision.
the paper copy that you have is the version that Bill Kelly had.
Let's go over what's changed.
Sure. I will start by, I had a little memo that went with this, and I was trying to, you guys had, is in the packet. You don't have it with this.
Yes,
But it was in the
it's
packet initially, yes. And it was just kind of summarizing what happened at the last meeting when we talked about this, and there were some concerns brought up by Allison about security measures and surveillance. I don't think, Allison didn't want to be duplicative. I think that was really what you were trying to get at, or more burdensome than was going to happen from the state level.
Right, and also just wanting the select board to be able to change things if, you know, they're like fees, so it wouldn't be stuck in an
Yes.
ordinance. If you
Yep.
wanted to raise fees or lower them.
Yep. So in order to address the fee piece, it specifically says fees.
No, wait, I'm sorry, we'll stop.
Go ahead.
What I wanted to know was, you said Bill Kelly made some changes to the draft we had in our packet, or not?
No, what you have in your hand now are the changes that Bill Kelly had.
Yeah, which ones are they? I don't.
So
I
this
just-
is not what's in our
subtract on the
packet?
back.
This is not what's in your packet. Correct. I'm going to get there, if you give me one moment. Let me just address the concerns of the fee piece. Section 5 is fees, says application and license fees for marijuana establishments shall be determined annually by the select board. So that is what is happening. The issue with security and surveillance that was brought up at the last meeting. I did further research and spoke with the folks at the Office of Marijuana Policy, and the state has not gutted that section on the security and the surveillance. So that is all still required, no matter what size tier you are, whether you're a grow or you're a testing lab or anything. It's still in the law, still in the rules. So what I did was a part of what they need to submit to the town is their application that they submit to the state, because how this works is an applicant would go to the state, they would submit everything they need to for the state, and it's background checks and all that stuff, and security plan, and your whole layout of your, say it's a grow, they would need to do that. And then the state issues them what's called a provisional license. Then that applicant has to come to the town here, first to the zoning board of appeals. They'd go to the zoning board of appeals with that provisional license. The zoning board would go through that process. Once they have that process through the zoning board, then they would need to come to the select board for a business license. And they need to include, part of what they need to submit is a copy of what they submitted to the state, which includes all the provisions, the security, all that stuff. And then,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, that's, in essence, that's the ordinance. You have a lot of wherewithal in this ordinance to, when you review them. What Bill, there's little lines on where he tracked changes.
Yeah.
The first and 2 pages are, and third page are just numbers. He added numbers to it. Thanks, Bill. And then section 7.5, I had approvals twice. He edited that for me. Page 5 was a number, and page 6, I said may, he said shall, and this is on enforcement and penalties. Yeah, again, I said may, he said shall. I had from, he went to 4, and then he did add the 500 down below, in the range, $50 to $500, which I referenced up above, I just didn't carry it down below. And then he added the following sentence: "A person found violating this ordinance shall pay the town of Camden's reasonable attorney fees relating to the enforcement of this ordinance. Town may seek immediate, temporary, and/or permanent injunctive relief for violations." Those are the changes that Bill had. Otherwise, he said it looks great. He said it looks very similar to the other ordinances he's reviewed across the state, because I think he's starting to get into this in Belfast, so I think he just did it. Outside of that, it is pretty consistent. I mean, other towns have gone a lot deeper and a lot further into it, but I honestly, what the state is requiring, and I am going to a workshop all day tomorrow on this, it's going to be sufficient to deal with licensing in Camden.
Okay, so the procedure going forward, assuming this is without any substantial changes, we would have to get this, we have a schedule to have this on public hearing.
You have it
September 3rd.
scheduled September 3rd for a
So
public
we
hearing.
need 7-day
Yeah.
notice before that, so we,
Yep.
so if there are any comments from the select board on this draft, we should hear them here collectively. Does anybody have any comments? Taylor?
I'm happy with this.
Ms. Allison?
I think it's great. I don't want anybody listening to think, oh, we're just being really
Right.
lax, because
Get
that's
that.
not the case. We
Yeah,
have
it's
a
not-
very
Trust me, it's not the case.
controlling ordinance that you
We
don't
have
even
one,
get to do
and,
this.
and the state is far more controlling than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
So
that's really good.
It's not like we're just
Yep.
saying to the wind with them.
I totally agree.
Just so you know how this, and just how it works, once you get your business, they would get their business license from you guys, then they take that back to the state with their zoning board of approval and this license. This license would serve as local authorization to the state.
Yeah.
So then that applicant takes that back to the state and
Yeah.
says, okay, can I now have a full license?
Yeah.
My final license as opposed to a provisional license, once they have that, and then they get the license.
Checks and balances in the process. Yeah.
Lots. No, anything else, Allison?
No.
No, myself included, great job.
Yes.
Great modifications, and I do agree, the strength in this thing is the strength of the state statutes, which are stronger than I thought they would be. Compliment them for
Yeah.
that. So I don't, to Ms.
I'm very comfortable with it. I reviewed it and
All right,
had
so then
actually
we're clear to
commented.
take it forward to a
Okay,
public hearing.
I don't,
on
yeah,
the
I don't
3rd.
need any action on this,
No,
because
you
we've got
don't.
the
No,
hearing
you
all
don't.
set,
No, you
so.
don't. No.
Tonight and
But thanks for
everything.
all the work.
Absolutely.
Again, for this ordinance draft.
Jeremy.
Then just a little backdrop on the next item on the agenda, which is the Clean Harbor Initiative update. Just as a backdrop for everybody, a couple of, I forget the exact dates, Abby can help me with the dates for the 2 reports that were done for the Camden Harbor, which I think was 2011.
2011, 2012.
2012 by other entities that did some testing and analysis of our harbor. In each case, trying to evaluate
Just one of them, so that it's a little darker.
where are the problems with our harbor have been in terms of pollution, because at one point, at least one point I'm aware of, the harbor was designated as one of the top 3 bad guys in the state. Since that time, principally, the Clean Beach organization has been doing testing of our harbor at one location at Lake Beach for about 10 weeks, I believe, during the summer months only. So with the help of the Conservation Commission, Roger Rittmaster, was brought to our attention, we probably need to pay some attention to a few items, not the least of which was starting with boat waste and making sure we're controlling that one. We agreed to hire an intern, and she's here tonight to discuss where we are in this activity. We've proceeded rather rapidly through the summer, I think, and done a lot of work, thanks to Roger and Abby, who have been out in our harbor every morning for weeks on end, doing testing in about 7 to 9 locations. We do all appreciate that, of course. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Abby as our intern for the summer. She's getting towards the end of her tenure with us and done a great job, and give us a summary of where we're at. This doesn't end here. We have, you'll see a lot more recommendations from the group. And again, why don't you take it away, Abby?
Oh, that was a good intro. Thanks. Presentation button will work.
Isn't that coming up?
Oh, just slow.
Take your time. I gotta find out where I'm at here. There it is.
Let's try this again.
You got it.
Oh, great.
There you
Okay.
go.
So yeah, my name's Abby Blakely, and I was the town's summer intern this summer, and my role as the town's intern was in part a continuation of sorts of a Clean Harbor initiative. As Bob stated, the last time water quality reports have been released in the area, we're back, and testing was done on the harbor specifically, was back in 2011. That was the last time the inner harbor has been tested extensively, so it's been a while. And in addition to conducting my own research and releasing a report on vessel discharge enforcement programs across the country, and providing recommendations to the town in that report on how we could go about addressing vessel discharge issues in the harbor. The point of this report is to provide you recommendations on how to address water pollution problems in general moving forward. So this will encompass a couple things. So I'll first give you an update on the summer harbor testing that Roger and I set out to do over the past month, our results and our findings. Then I'll talk about bacteria testing in the harbor moving forward. And based on my report from vessel discharge and some of the additional information gathering activities I've done, I'll also address how the town can encourage private and public harbor users to use cleaner boating practices. And then to go along with that, I'll talk about the future use of our harbor's pump-out services that we provide via boat and station at no charge to everyone who uses the harbor. And lastly, I'll touch on what the town can do regarding bacteria testing at on-land sites moving forward as well, because those are equally important. So first, to give an update on, or to brief you on what exactly we did. As Bob said, the Maine Healthy Beaches program is the only program in the state that tests at Lake Beach once a week during warmer months annually. So up until now, no testing has been done in the area that we have tested in since 2011. So seeing the need to evaluate the state of our harbor's health, Roger Rittmaster and I consulted with Dave Bolstridge of the wastewater department, and we set out to test at originally 7 sites around Camden Harbor, and then we later expanded it to 2 outer harbor sites, which is sites 8 and 9, but we discontinued those after 4 days due to negligible results, which is great. So mainly for the 16-day total testing period, we focused on sites 1 through 7. We abided by the Maine Healthy Beaches field procedure, and then we used IDEX laboratory tests in the lab, and Dave Bolstridge provided the tests in the lab to us kindly to use, which was really nice of him. And then we specifically tested for enterococci bacteria. It's a fecal coliform bacteria that is an indicator for both human and animal feces in salt water. So E. coli, you can test for E. coli in freshwater only, and then the EPA specifically recommends that you test for enterococci in marine water. So here are a few examples of the data. If you can see from 2 of the sites we tested, sites 1 and 2, those are the closest ones to land in our inner harbor. They are not too far off from some of the big windjammers where they're docked. So in the state of Maine, EPA's suitable levels for enterococci in saltwater are 104 colony-forming units per 100 milliliters of sample water and 35 CFUs per 100 milliliters of sample water for a 30-day average. So CFU stands for colony-forming unit, and at first when we were doing the counts, we used IDEX's MPN, which stands for most probable number, and 1 CFU essentially equals 1 MPN, so you consider 1 CFU is 1 piece of bacteria, theoretically. So the terms are used interchangeably in labs across the world, and I made sure to verify that. So sites 1 and 2 are used as examples up there. And just to note, we tested for a length of 16 days, but the first 4 dates we did not consider because there was a procedural error in the field. So the 12 days are what we computed averages for. And the results we got across the board at all sites, 1 through 9, excuse me, were either negligible or close to negligible or too high. So as you can see, they're close to 0 on some days, less than 1, or they are much too high when you reference the 104 CFUs per 100 milliliter sample. This is the pattern we saw across all sites, and regardless of the fact that we only tested for 12 days and not 30, the average that we calculated for the 12 days that we tested was already far higher than 35 CFU 30-day mean that the EPA gives. So if we had likely tested for 30 consecutive days, we would have seen a number that was even higher than the numbers we saw, which were already in the hundreds at 12 days. So the climate conditions for the harbor this summer were very dry, which may be a contributing factor as to why the bacteria counts on some days were 0 or close to 0. However, I did get a chance to drag Steve Pixley out into the water during the 5-inch rain event the town experienced on August 8th. So on the single day there was a rain event, the counts at all of the sites were in the thousands, with the exception of Lake Beach, which was 563 CFUs, ironically the lowest. When considering the 104 CFUs per 100 milliliter sample, and you look at how high these are, the highest being 19,863 in front of the waterfront, these levels have now become dangerously high. So even without the rain, the counts were more often than not higher than the state suitable level. So especially with the dangerously high levels we saw during the rain event, and the fact that our averages at day 12 and not even at day 30 were already much higher than the EPA's suitable level standard for 30-day average, the data clearly shows that there is a pollution issue in Camden Harbor and that there are multiple sources. So given the potential for an increased frequency of rain events in Camden Harbor, we may begin to experience more dangerously high bacterial levels more often, given that in the future it's possible that we can see a wetter summer than we have been seeing. Which brings me to my first recommendation. It's that the town should continue doing enterococci bacteria testing in Camden Harbor in the coming months, specifically in wetter months when we're going to experience more rain events, where a lot of pollution pathways, of which there are multiple, will find their way into the harbor. And it can only be more helpful to add to the collection of data which is small at this point because we had limited time, we did what we could, but I mean, nothing's been done since 2011, so this is a good start. And it does say a lot. So luckily, the Harbor Committee has already expressed an interest in continuing testing in the coming months. So I sent off all of the relevant documents and procedures to Mark Siegenthaler, the head or the chair of the Harbor Committee, as well as Bruce Peel, I believe his name is. He contacted me, and he's a member of the Harbor Committee that specifically would like to continue testing, take a boat out. So I told them if they had any questions, they could reach out, but I gave them a ton of information, so I'm hoping that'll prepare them well for continuing testing on the harbor. My second recommendation regarding improving the harbor's water quality is one that involves its private users. So it's recommended that commercial vessel contracts be updated to ensure they're adhering to town policy regarding vessel discharge. Simply put, these vessel agreements need to reflect state and federal law regarding vessel discharge, as they currently don't. And I talked about this at length. That was the gist of my 32-page report on vessel discharge, what's occurring across the country, how towns are preparing their enforcement programs for it, depending on the damage, so to speak, of high bacterial levels, such as Avalon Bay. They almost had their harbor shut down in the 80s, and so they have the gold standard of enforcement programs when it comes to vessel discharge, and you can get banned for up to 2 years if you violate any of their inspection procedures, and I outline that in a variety of different case studies in the boat waste report that's available online. To begin to address public harbor users, the town of Camden should considering approving the mailer documents, which are included in your packets, to mooring and slip permit holders. They consist of a vessel discharge pledge and a marine sanitation device survey, so I'd like to direct your attention now to those. I believe you have them?
We do.
Okay, great. And consider approving them at the end of this presentation. The documents look like this. Depending on the town's data needs, these could change. More specifically, the survey could change. But the survey is to get basic information about what boaters' MSD configurations look like on board if they have a head, because it is state and federal law. You must have a U.S. Coast Guard approved marine sanitation device if you have a head on your boat. Other questions include questions about, like, do you use the pump out services? How often? Which ones do you use? And then there are educational awareness questions regarding the no discharge area in West Penobscot Bay, as well as Clean Water Act questions, whether or not they're aware that those are the rules. And the pledge is pretty self-explanatory. I pledge to comply with these laws, use the pump out services when in West Penobscot Bay, make sure my marine sanitation device is compliant and secured so that no discharge happens, amongst other things. Lastly, in addition to approving these documents, I highly recommend that Town of Camden permanently establish the boater education campaign that I had the opportunity to take part in. or revamp, so to speak, in order to broaden its scope to include all boaters and all businesses on the harbor. I want to stress that point. This is just a starting place, and, you know, we have to start somewhere, and this is where we're starting, but everyone should be addressed because it's something that everyone needs to be aware of, the laws and what's allowed and what's not. Recommendation 4, so to strengthen our efforts in tracking the usage of our free pump-out service, our boat and our station, which we provide at no cost to all of the harbor's users, which is a very great thing. The town of Camden should work with the harbor personnel who run the boat and Lyman Morse who run the station to collect reliable service data moving forward. So for example, a few of us, including Bob Falciani and Roger Rittmesser, we attended a meeting with Lyman Morse, and we just started a discussion about regarding the possible addition of a pump-out station meter to measure the amount of gallons of waste per service that are pumped, which will help greatly in tracking the service's usage pattern. The station does not currently have such a meter, and there are grants, I believe there are grants, I plan on looking into it, that exist at the state level as a part of the pump-out grant program that will likely be able to pay for the meter, but don't quote me on that. It's research I have yet to do. In addition, there are electronic spreadsheets with the desired data parameters that have already been created by myself with the intention of distributing them to all of the pump-out service personnel so they can enter their data logs at the end of every season and electronically send it back to the town so we can do statistical analysis with, you know, is the frequency of use of these services going up or down, and try to figure out why. Lastly, the town of Camden, specifically the Camden Wastewater Department, should continue fecal coliform testing as well in problematic town infrastructure areas in wetter months. So we had the same problem. Part of my internship was helping Dave test it on land sites around town. And as I said, the summer's been increasingly dry as the months went on. And so this makes it difficult to follow a flow of bacteria when there's no flow to even sample from. So it's hard to track. And as efforts to, you know, identify the infrastructure-based water pollution spots, such as like the town INIs, as well as camming the pipes under the streets, those efforts have largely been exhausted. The town INIs are coming to a close, which is great. There's, you know, a few people who haven't responded yet, and obviously the town's really, you know, ramping up enforcement with those, which is fantastic. And then just speaking to Dave Bolstridge myself, a couple of the sites that I had to sample around town this summer, he's stuck cameras down in all the pipes repeatedly. And so it seems like these options have been exhausted. So I recommend that the town start a discussion to consider other options on how we can better track pollution in infrastructure, land-based sites.
So that would be like Brooks, little.
Yes, yes. So you mentioned to me stream survey. I'm not familiar with the process yet. I'm not sure if it would require doing another voluntary door-to-door, getting permission from homeowners. That's something that we should definitely continue discussing, though, with code enforcement and Dave Bolstridge. And then to sum everything up, discussions are clearly already underway on how best to address pollution sources on land and in Camden's Harbor. And I strongly believe these recommendations should be incorporated into these discussions. And just as the town of Camden has been taking measures to better enforce the requirement of septic system inspections on land, we must also do the same with pollution sources on and around the harbor. And if we're to adequately prepare for the effects of climate change, all sources of water pollution must be held to the same standard regardless of the quantity of pollution coming from a single source, which frankly is impossible to quantify, but we'll try our hardest to do. And so thank you for your time, and thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to be your intern. I'm not done yet, but I just wanted to publicly thank you. Audra, thank you for lending me your ear for the past month, you know, just advice, listening to me. I really appreciated it. And to Bob and Roger specifically for being fantastic mentors to me. It was a tremendous learning experience, and I don't want it to end.
No, we don't want it to end either. I would point out a couple of things you highlighted, and I think it's very important. The many facets of this issue is just not singular whatsoever. Most importantly is to not let it die here. We are creating for what I call an awareness program. I think the principal thrust a lot of what we're trying to accomplish is start with awareness, but then drill. And we still don't know exactly the sources of some of, we did prove that on a rainy day, it got worse for 24 hours. That we did find, and we need to do more. We are attacking wastewater side, we are attacking all other aspects, and it will take some time to drill into where the real sources are. But if you don't stay at it, you'll never get there.
Yeah.
So in that regard, one action that I would like the select board to move forward with.
Can I ask a question?
Of course,
Or
of course.
is
Wait,
that for later?
Go ahead, let's ask questions
the
first.
action phase, or-
Then we can do an action later. Go ahead. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Good idea.
First of all, thank you. This has been amazing. Thank you, Roger and Bob, and this is what I've been hoping for a long time, to see it just really move forward and taken really seriously. I've learned a lot from you just over the summer and from the reports. Do you know, is there anything similar to this going on in the river, I mean, in terms of testing? Do you know what the extent of the testing, is there any testing happening along the river?
Not that I know
And is there
of.
anything more on the lake other than, I know there's the Maine Healthy Beach, Maine
Sure,
Healthy
sure,
Beaches doesn't
Bob.
do that. What does happen on the lake? And that might be outside of your.
That was a previous job of mine, actually. I worked for the McGonagall Watershed Association, and it was a bi-weekly testing. So we tested for bacteria, but it was mainly more basic things like salinity, dissolved oxygen, et cetera, et cetera. They send all those tests off to the state. I don't know if they have the data available to the public, but I'm still in touch with Paul Leeper, the executive director, and I'd be happy to get in touch with him and ask how that's going. Last time I checked in with him, the program had gotten a lot more popular, and so a lot of the kids who are working for him now are actually going into college to study this type of stuff, which is, I'm hoping that they're, extremely motivated. I seem to take it like borderline too seriously, and I was just an invasive plant and animal boat monitor with my little T-shirt. But as far as I know, it's still a bi-weekly thing. And then river testing, I'm not aware of anything happening on the river. But I mean, we can't just test one area.
Right, I mean, testing, it's just such an important thing. I feel really strongly that we need to allocate more resources to it, by doing exactly this. And thank you, Roger, for,
I know that there's been testing in the past on the river, correct? As part of the 2011, I believe one section of the
Right.
expanded testing was on the river. So I think moving forward, definitely include the river in efforts to do water quality monitoring, not just in the inner harbor, but also take a look at what's been previously done as well, because that could be of some value.
like, there's always talk about the septic systems that are failing and
They have a goose population problem as well
all
on the
kinds of
lake.
things. And
Yeah, they have the same issues that we have on the
It's
harbor.
good, I just want
Well,
more. I
that-
want
no,
Abby,
that's an
like,
excellent
all the
point.
time.
I think it's important. We and Roger and I and Abby discussed many times the multiple sources of potential for pollution. They are boat waste, certainly.
Yes.
They are our systems of our city, which are wastewater, sewage, and drainage.
A couple
They
pump
are-
stations.
Yeah, we have a river, yes, we have that too, and we have just run off the land. Because, and clearly during the spike we saw was after a rain event, so it's leading us slowly towards finding this lost golden fleece. It's probably a combination of things, but like I said, it'll take some time to get there, but absolutely, the river's part
It
of it.
runs off into the river, too,
Absolutely.
so it's not just like the river that's separate.
Absolutely, the river
You
must
can
be
see
part
it
of it.
changes colors like it's,
Yeah, and in my opinion, the river hasn't been adequately addressed.
that way, like, on so many levels.
Yeah, just one question, and I'll echo what Allison said. Thank you again for your hard work. That was really impressive. And I think that's going to be super helpful for us moving forward to have that as a base to figure out where to go next. The 5-inch rain event on August 8th, obviously the bacteria numbers skyrocketed.
Yep.
I'm curious if there's similar data in other locations around, other harbors or locations around the state that we can compare that to. So does that rain event jive with what happens in other rain events in other places, or does ours stand out?
No, I believe it's similar, especially, the city of Portland has dealt with a lot of pollution in their harbor. due to infrastructure issues, and they've gotten fined a lot of money recently as well, I read, for the same exact issues.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Ms. Jen?
Um,
Skeptical that that was 5 inches, but.
I think that was a great question, Taylor, and I just want to thank you. This is fantastic, and I think that as Bob and my fellow board members have said, that consistency with this is so important. And I think you've made a brilliant presentation. I think you've gotten us off to a fantastic start, and thank you so much. And thank you, Roger. Thank you, Bob, and everyone who's worked. Thank you, Steve, wherever you are. But everyone who's worked with Abby and
Yeah,
Dave.
I was the one.
It
I
sounds like you
dragged
had a
him
lot
out.
of great support that
Right,
I'm
yeah.
glad to hear, but you did a lot of great work here to get us started, so thanks.
And I think I would close too with thanking you, Abby, for your digging into this. You did a great job. Honestly, it was Roger, Abby, Dave Volstrich, and Steve Pixley who really were the feet on the ground, and I just sat back and waved the lawn because I had an easy job. But they were in the boats every morning doing their thing, and that's very much appreciated. Could you pop back to the pledge document if you could, so everybody knows what we're talking about? Just in the way of what this is, and it's regarding the boat waste. This is a one-pager, back-to-back printed, that we would,
like this.
that we propose to put into the, when I get my packet every April to pay for my mooring in Camden Harbor, you're required to fill out certain things about your boat. And I would have to fill this out. It's a huge awareness thing, because I can't tell you how confusing to a lot of people this discharge thing is in the ocean. It's not,
owners.
it's not black and white, trust me, and some people who know boating don't know it. So it's an awareness thing, but I would like the select board to consider approving this for including in that package every April as a first step. As I just said, it's a first step, we got many to go, but that's the purpose of this document, so.
We also, I'd like to note, we also did, Steve and I pushed it on Steve to give out a marine sanitation device survey for the commercial vessel owners as well, so we collected that information.
That was done in
from them.
parallel, correct?
Yes.
As a separate issue, but I'd like a motion to include this in the packet in April, if you agree.
Included in the package, does that mean they're required to do it
Yep, yeah, they'll get
in
their,
order to get there?
they get their sticker. To get-
Okay.
To get the sticker I put on my boat. This is why I paid my excise tax, and I gave all the town the information it had to have as a form of other documents beside this I have to sign as a mooring or as a float owner or user. And this document would go, it's more or less an awareness thing. Many people don't understand the marine sanitation device thing. We're not trying to make them redesign their system. We just want to know. This was done, by the way, in a previous time period, as I recall, in a survey that was sent out to boat owner, mooring owners, and they got 35 responses. So this
There's
is just
a
a way.
link to an online survey that
An
was
online
optional,
survey, it
so.
didn't work. So this is just an awareness thing. We'll try it for next year, see how it goes, and take it from there.
What do you mean try and see how it goes? They're going to be required to do it, right?
Yeah. They'll
And
get
does it
this.
say that if they don't do it accurately, they're
No,
Required before
no,
obtaining your
no,
vessel's
no,
mooring
no.
or slip point.
Many people, this is, remember, it's no.
prosecuted for misleading the, no?
No, because a lot of people don't know what kind of, they have a nice boat and they know that if they press a button, the toilet flushes. And that's all they know.
Well, they should find, if they don't know, then they
That's-
should
this
find
will-
out before they
This
fill
will-
that out.
You can turn to your boat yard, and if they need the information to fill out what I have in my boat. So for a knowledge base, it is a good thing for a boat owner to know. I think it's very
Because
important.
these are the people in the boat yards and the people who sell the boats, they should
Right.
be letting, the
Right.
people who are
They
buying their boats
definitely
know what
Right.
Right.
boats have, as far as an MSD is.
So this is not for the commercial,
No, the commercial part will come in the,
Deal with them
in the
separately.
licenses. There's her recommendation, if you recall, one of the recommendations was to modify the current licenses for windjammer and day sailors to reflect something similar to this. Because they don't get this package. They don't have moorings and floats.
okay, so we'll deal with that. We
Correct.
shouldn't ask
We
questions
just
about
couldn't,
that now.
we couldn't get it all done at the same time. We have discussed it. There are some actions in place. We have discussed it certainly with Mark Sigenthaler, because the Harbor Committee is contemplating some potential changes to the license agreements. And this would be part of those changes to enforce whatever we decide to do with
And
those
that comes
agreements.
before
But
you in
that's going to
November.
be a discussion of a future action by the board.
Okay, well, just now, I would say that I think Steve should be, or the harbor master should be encouraged to actually board the vessel and do the inspection for the commercial
That's-
vessels, that it
that-
shouldn't just be a self-reporting.
That's under discussion. They have done a self-reporting so far, But under discussion is the possibility for the town of Camden, whomever, to walk on board and check.
Shouldn't be that hard.
The town does have the
It is.
authority under Section
It is.
312 of the Clean Water Act to inspect your marine sanitation device to ensure it's functioning properly.
So why does it even need to be a discussion item? Is it controversial or?
No, we haven't got the wording in the license agreement yet.
Oh, okay.
That's
It's not
all,
like-
that's all. No, no. It's not. We just want to, the select board is going to approve the license agreement one time. And there's going to be some things that the Harbor Committee is considering, and including, we forward to Mark, suggested language for this in that document, documents this too. Windjammer expires next May, and every year so far, we have the day sailor licenses.
Is this a good time to make any other suggestions about that? Like if,
Sure, sure, if you,
I saw Jeremy like,
no, well, sure, if you want to, sure, absolutely.
I just wanted to reiterate, I mean, I've been going to the last couple of harbor committees, and I think everyone on the harbor committee understands that this is an issue that needs to be addressed, and there will definitely be language in license agreements moving forward for windjammers and day sailors that they have to have a device on boat.
and the harbor master would,
Sure,
you know.
that's fine, yeah. I mean, I think
I don't
we're
know if
just
that's a
figuring
big
out,
sticking point, but if it is, I think,
well, if they want their license, then,
I mean, it shouldn't be hard. It's easier. Just have Steve do it, train him how to identify it and then.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's again on September 10th.
the what? Oh, yeah, it is, you're right, next meeting.
Who's the harbor committee liaisons again?
It was Taylor and myself, but principally Taylor right now at the moment.
Okay.
So I'll make sure that that comes up.
Yeah,
As Audra said, the licenses come due in November,
correct.
so,
That's for day sailors only.
right.
And you're gonna deal with the parking thing too, maybe?
You're talking about at the town landing? Yes, it's a hot button item. That's,
Yeah, one of the backdrops, I think, and then Abby faced a little bit of this, and Roger too, I think, and I know I heard it, because we were looking at various entities and groups, and some people, I heard the comment 3 or 4 times, is why are we picking, quote unquote, picking on this? Until we really, and that's a good purpose of this meeting, is to tell people we're not picking on, we are attacking everything in parallel. It's just we happen to be ahead of the curve on boat waste, because it's a little bit easier to get awareness there. But we're we talked about I&I, we talked about wastewater treatment system, we talked about storm drainage. The list goes on and on. The river.
I mean, we're definitely not picking on the boat owners.
No, we're
Everybody's had to
definitely
have
not.
their
I mean,
basements
You're
inspected.
doing all
like-
of the things that you said. I mean, the boaters are coming almost at the end.
That's correct.
I mean,
That's
people from the
correct.
town have been in my basement, like, it's not,
Correct.
the court.
right. we're taking-
And I would be remiss also if we didn't thank Lyman Morse for their cooperation here also. They're very much would like to, as you probably all know, our pump out boat pumps out to Lyman Morse. So our pump out boat goes through Lyman Morse to the wastewater treatment plant. But hasn't to date been any means of measuring that pump out total, including Lyman Morse. They don't have a meter
Are you
yet.
at least keeping track of which boats come?
They do. They
Maybe
do
so
that.
that's
They do that.
publicly available
They,
or-
they do that. I haven't seen
Or
it
the
publicly
town.
available yet. We could certainly get it. I know Abby's seen it.
Jimmy Leo, who runs the pump out boat, he's,
Oh, the Lyman Morse and the
Well, yeah,
records.
Jimmy's been like strict on the books with keeping that information, especially like including the boaters' names. But the information, the data that I was given by Lyman Morse did not include any names of boats.
You're right.
It was just, I
Time
believe it-
spent.
Time spent, and there was no estimation of
The
gallons as
No.
well. So it was
No
pretty
means to
vague.
measure it.
So, but they,
Be that difficult.
I mean, they don't have a meter, I understand that, but they could certainly keep track of the boat names
I think, oh, sure.
and the frequency.
Oh,
And
yeah.
is there a mechanism to ask them to do that, or?
Actually, I'd like to correct myself. The data that I was given by Nancy Gleason over there didn't include that information. However, when I went over to have a preliminary discussion with Charlie Foote, I did get to look at the clipboard where they keep the logs, and I believe then there were names there. But that was not included in the data that I was given.
That's correct. I agree. That's a correct statement. So there's work to be done, but Lyman Morse, I want to say they have been very cooperative, been very proactive here and trying to, but it's our harbor and they know that.
Bob, wanted to mention that from a septic system perspective, the code office has addressed a handful of failing septic systems already this summer.
Oh, really?
Yes.
On the lake?
One was on the lake and then 2 were upland.
That's-
Upland doesn't matter. I mean, if it runs into a stream,
Right,
right?
sorry,
So,
yeah. I mean,
It was
I
one of the,
understand. I mean, you're closer
how
to
do
the
you
resource.
find, how have you found them?
One, I think we found it, there was obvious
Percolate.
failure. obvious failure.
Percolation.
And then two, the people came into the office and said, we need help
Great.
to deal with their septic system. And on two of those occasions, we actually, I mean, they were folks that actually needed some help financially to do them. I was going to send them to our trust funds. We actually sent them to Penquis, and
Oh, good.
Penquis had funded both of those fixes, so.
Great.
It's all working out.
Big happy family.
Taylor?
People who think they have a problem to come forward.
Well, we'll figure that out.
Taylor, you had something?
Is there a mechanism in place now to provide some sort of information like this or poll transient vessels that come to the harbor?
We talked about that a lot, and I think one of the things we did talk about is producing some downstream, some flyers to get the Lyman Morris Yacht Club downtown, just to say, hey, well, for example, both entities, Lyman Morris and the town, provide free pump-out services. Boaters have to, it's making
There's
it
already
easy.
Maine
We
Healthy
charge up to
Beaches hasn't made a
$10
flyer
per
back in
service in the
2012.
state of Maine.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that we provide it free is a big thing, and that all of the costs are reimbursed by the state annually to the town is a great privilege.
Correct.
90%, I think it's 90%.
I'm not quite sure. I think it may be
No,
less than
we have
that.
a $45,000 grant from the state, and I believe we're probably up around 20, I think it's 90%.
It's 90%.
Yep. So we collect about 20-something thousand dollars a year, of which a very small, very, very small portion is from Lyman Morris.
And those informational flyers do already exist, and I've put them, with permission, I put them down at the Harbor Master Hut, but they have been getting pushed off to the side, and I haven't gotten the chance to approach Lyman Morris or the Camden Yacht Club yet about stocking those flyers.
So again, to our action, I'd like to have a motion to put this flyer into the packet for next season's moorings and floats.
So moved.
Those in favor? 4-0. That's an award to you and Roger.
Can I ask one more question about septic systems? And because
Sure.
I feel like Roger
Sure.
might know, or people
Sure.
are here. Is there a mechanism for, I know there's a new state law that requires inspections at the when there's a transfer of property, right? That's going to go into effect? Like, I would love to see,
It's always been there.
no, it hasn't.
Mine was.
You haven't had to get them
A couple of
inspected.
years ago, there was one that for oceanfront properties, and now it applies in the shoreland zone.
Aha, I have oceanfront, so that's
Just
why
in
I
the
did
shoreline zone, though.
Okay.
So is there a mechanism for the town, just like we've passed some things like with the styrofoam floats? We've done something that's more strict than state law.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a mechanism for some sort of a model?
I will look into it, I
ordinance that we
understand.
could-
I hear
Not
you.
just the transfer properties, but every few years or
Mm-hmm.
even just once, an inspection for existing?
Yeah, I will look into that for you.
Come up here, Roger, please.
I would like to see it.
So with Vicky Dudera's help, we actually looked into what the regulations are around septic systems on the McGuntacook Lake. And it turns out this is a state function, and that towns right now have no rights to go into
Right.
inspect septic systems. I mean, it was really frustrating. So I said to Vicky, and this is a proposal, because I think this is the next big thing. We've done a lot of stuff in the harbor, but really in terms of improving the water quality in the harbor, we got to look upstream. And my proposal to Vicky was that we actually need to modify the state law that says if a town wants to have a more rigorous ordinance of its own, that they should be allowed to do that. Now, I don't know how far that will go, but I would ask all of you to bug Vicky as well. And I think that would give Camden the authority to develop an ordinance that, because right now, it's really weak. A lot of these cottages camps have been in families for generations, and until it sells, they don't have to do anything about their cesspools.
And there could be cesspools, too.
And some are.
Not septic.
And some are, yeah.
There's quite a few in this
And,
town.
yeah. And the only other thing I'd like to say is just to thank Bob personally, that your help in doing this and getting this harbor cleanup was just tremendous. And it really gave Abby and I basically the go-ahead to do
Thanks,
as aggressive
Roger, but
as we
again, you
can.
did all the work with
The
Abby.
data itself is fascinating, and I call it hypothesis generating. And if you look at the numbers, what it says first of all, runoff is actually a minor, because it's major when it occurs, but all those other days, there is almost no runoff. And when you look at the patterns, it shows a high number and then gradual decreases. It suggests pollution sources other than runoff, and the most obvious is boat waste. So I think this is the way to go, to be as rigorous as we can. And it's just hard, because boaters haven't really focused on this up till now, and Camden will be the first in the state to be really aggressive. So I think that's great. Thanks.
Raj, thanks so much.
Interesting to try to compare, if we can, the data that we had from the Inner Harbor with the data that the Lake Association is collecting on similar days, and I'm just curious if there's
correlation.
exactly, yeah.
Well, we know that anywhere in Camden, when it rains, it's not safe to swim. I mean, you can basically assume that the levels are going to be high, whether it's on the lake or, I think the problem with the data everywhere has been that it's on a certain day, no matter, it's like Tuesdays. And I don't know when the biweekly lake testing happens, but is it on a certain day always, or it's not, it's like Abby said, we really just need a lot more data so that we can, the sampling side, it's just not big enough to,
To me, it's just exciting.
I don't think there's
you know,
enough, they don't test enough to really know.
Yeah, to me, it's just exciting that we are collectively taking a hard look at all this across the board. We're really at the tip of the iceberg. But the key is we've got to maintain the pressure, otherwise we'll be looking back in 8 years after I'm dead and not having accomplished a damn thing, you know.
Right,
So-
I mean, that's why I joined the Conservation Commission I read this report a long time ago, and then Carrie from Maine Healthy Beaches said, you should join the Conservation Commission if that's what you care about. And Roger has really taken on that issue too, but it's been since 2011, 2012. We should be doing an update to that study, like what Abby's doing. We should be doing that every year. And the only way is going to be allocating resources. There's no volunteer program that can 100%
Cover it.
do this. So
No,
I
it's
think
true.
it's going to be on us to figure out
Right,
a way to fund additional,
I agree.
like Abby's.
I totally agree.
That is an important point, and just us being out there in the harbor master's boat, I'm sure that there were boaters that said, oh, we're being watched.
It's true.
And that has an effect on.
That's true. What,
Questions inquiring about it definitely probably indirectly raised some compliance levels because, you're out on the harbor.
I don't doubt it at all. Awareness.
I was wearing my yellow vest when I was testing for day bulge rage around town, so I was, I showed up pretty bright on some of the foggier days as well, so. But I had half a dozen, at least, people come up and ask what I was doing, and they were interested in it, which was
Right,
great.
cool.
So, the act of continuing doing that is in itself a great thing to raise awareness.
I agree. Is there a report on the website yet?
I don't believe so, but
At some
we're going
point, we
to
should
post
put it on the website.
The final harbor testing report, yes.
No, your final long report on this whole issue, the whole report you wrote about this. You have a full document of, what, 20, 30 pages?
Oh, the boat waste report?
Yep,
That's
yep.
already online.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, good. All right, with that, we'll move on to item 9, which is the approval of the $8 million bond anticipation note for the wastewater treatment plant upgrades.
So as we've discussed before, the process for funding the upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant is that we need to get bridging finance, and then once the project is completed, USDA comes in at the end, pays off the bridging finance, and then, we start our loan terms with USDA RD. And so we've kind of, I need two things from you here. One is to approve which lender we're going to go with, and two is we need a formal resolution. I've printed a copy and placed it all on your desks. Just saying that I've received authorization from the select board to
Allow me to sign it. And
secure this
sign it.
bridging finance.
Right.
And the reason we're going with 8 million instead of the full 13.9 million, or 12.5 million rather,
12.5.
is that, it needs to be bank qualified. So it was just easier for us to split it into two. So we do 8 million up front, and then we come back at, further along, maybe 2 years' time, maybe a year and a half, and we do the remaining 4.5 million.
Will the interest rate that we have now, I assume that that won't necessarily hold true when we go back for the second time?
It may
I
not,
would anticipate that it would not.
Taylor, wow.
I would agree. It's rare that they would. Now, this, for the $8 million, it will, whatever bank we pick, which are actually quite a diverse range of interest rates. Now, those
Yeah.
interest rates all have the same basis of calculation for payment of interest?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a copy of the RFP that we sent out to the potential lenders. And the way that we did this was, we asked any financial institution with a branch in town to submit, as well as any other financial institution that we had done business with in the past.
Okay, if the only thing I saw was, if the maturity date were to go past 2022, would that be a problem?
No.
So, that said, unless any questions, the proposed vote would be to, quote, authorize the chair of the select board and treasurer of the town of Camden to issue up to $8 million in temporary financing on behalf of the town. Said bond anticipation note to be awarded on such terms and conditions as the chair and treasurer determine to be in the best interest of the town, and further, to authorize the chair, treasurer, and clerk to execute any and all documents necessary to issue said note, and to make such internal revenue code elections and take such other action as they may deem necessary to accomplish the issuance of said note. End of quote.
It's a lot of latitude.
Yeah, it gives me a chance to figure out a way to have some of this money go to my bank account. Just kidding, people. But anyway, that's the resolution that Audra's looking for us to approve.
That's standard.
Yes.
Are there any other major factors that play a role in choosing the lender besides the interest rate? That really matter to
No.
us?
There can be, sometimes they'll get a little tricky or creative on how they calculate the interest rate over the months. And that hasn't happened here from when I read the RFP. They were smart, very smart in the way they wrote how to calculate that interest.
Okay.
And if there are any difference, which happens sometimes if you go over this amount, we're going to charge you a little bit a rider on the interest rate. There was none of that in the RFP, so.
And the treasurer is the finance director? Or
Actually, Marlene is the treasurer.
I would just assume that we're going to pick one of the two lower.
I would assume we're going with KeyBank.
Yeah, me too. I would personally be a little opposed to using the higher ones for a couple of reasons, but,
I believe, Audrey, you're recommending.
For a couple
I
of
would
reasons
recommend
that
that
aren't
you choose the lowest one.
KeyBank is fairly obviously the lowest one.
Yeah, those differences are significant.
On $8 million?
Yeah, it's significant.
Oh, yeah. So.
is there any reason, sorry,
So go ahead.
I see, is it something in our charter that says it's supposed to be the treasurer and the
This is
select board
actually
chair?
required by USDA.
Oh,
Oh,
This is their standard language that they like all municipalities to adopt.
so used to
I know.
saying the town manager is in charge and the,
I was a little surprised at it myself because I kept trying to change it to vice chair.
I think, when they think about, when they think about sort of,
the Charter Commission.
select board form of governments, it's kind of like a broad, it's towns the size of Camden to little tiny,
Yeah.
kind of 3-member select board
Yeah.
shops.
right.
A lot of those are.
All right, well, I trust you to involve Audra as needed.
Someone's got to look over your shoulder.
It's not as complicated as you think.
I mean, this isn't my area of,
Understand.
I defer 100% to, unless you were to choose like one of the ones I don't like, then.
Same here.
No risk of that,
So
not
let's
even
start-
close to the lowest interest rates.
So why don't we start with a motion to choose
The lender.
the recommended lender?
I move that we choose KeyBank at an interest rate of 1.99%.
Second.
All those in favor? 4-0. And then a second motion to accept the resolution as read in the record tonight.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Perfect, that one's done. Lastly, on the agenda, we have the approval of a memorandum of understanding with Coastal Mountain Land Trust and for Round the Mountain Trail. I love that term. You don't say around the mountain, it's Round the Mountain Trail.
Like
Anyway.
they're rounding the mountain
That's
instead
right,
of,
that's what I
yeah,
thought. Yeah,
that's a
how
good
you-
point.
How do you round a mountain? Anyway, I digress, because I'm getting tired. No, go ahead, Jeremy.
And maybe I'll introduce Ryan Gates. Ryan, I don't know if you want to come up, but Ryan is the project manager from Coastal Mountain Land Trust on this. I've actually known Ryan a long time, and it's nice to be working with him on this.
Welcome, Ryan.
Ian couldn't be here.
Sure.
But Ian and I and Audra, Ian for the most part drafted this, Audra and I reviewed the MOU, and I'm sure Ryan did as well. I made a couple of changes. There was one specific point on the permitting piece that the original MOU said that they'd submit the permit by rules, I think is what
Yeah.
it said.
Yeah.
I changed that to applicable permits.
Good idea.
Outside of that, everything looks good to me. I had a good conversation with Ian earlier today on this, and, I mean, again, we got a great working relationship with them. You know, Beth has a relationship with Ryan and Ian. I've been working with both of them on this. Beth will be the project manager kind of on this, but I will be overseeing a lot of it, I think, at least making sure they're doing what they need to do.
Sure.
They are hiring a third-party inspector. That would be Gartley and Dorsey to handle the erosion control inspections. So they'll be doing that, and I'm sure I will be involved in those as well.
Right.
This allows them to apply for permits, which they need to do, because they want to get going. So,
Sure.
you got any concerns or questions? What's that?
Co-permits.
Co-permits, yes.
So what?
We're going to be co-applicants on the permits.
All right, Alice, you had a question?
Who is, okay, so I guess that answers my question. Who is ultimately responsible for anything that goes wrong?
Ultimately, it would be both of us if we're both co-applicants.
And depends on wrong.
Well, if
It's wrong in what way?
if DEP gets on us for some reason.
If we get sued by the neighbors, if we mess up Hosmer Pond, if we hurt somebody, someone gets hurt on the job, that would be contractors, but,
Yep. And they're the ones hiring the contractors to do the work. If you want, I can get Bill Kelly to draft something.
I'm working through- I'm not
Indemnifying
saying
the
I-
town of anything, I can do that, we can add that.
be co-applicant and be, I just want to make sure, like, I think everybody wants to make sure of the same thing, that we don't have another snowball situation. And since we're especially at the snowball area,
Yeah.
it seems like if you put Coastal Mountain Land Trust in the role of Ragged Mountain Foundation, I just want to make, can you outline sort of what's different here and how, what safeguards are in place here that were not before? I know you weren't here
I
before,
was not
but
here before, so
the
I don't
project
have any, I
manager
don't have
is,
any knowledge of that old agreement, so I don't know what that
Well,
said.
to Allison's point, I mean, believe me, I infinitely trust Coastal Mountain Land Trust and knowing and his predecessors very well. But this is by the way, this is a memorandum of understanding. This is not a contract. So there's a
Right.
question whether it's even how legally enforceable it is. I understand that.
Yes.
But yeah, we should be clear on paying, for example, it talks about paying the costs of contract to complete the approved scope of work. That's the easy part. The hard part is if something happens during this construction, and I understand it's not really huge construction amount, that really helps a lot. But if there are any issues that evolve from this, yeah, where is the financial responsibility needs to be, it should be clear.
Right.
It should be clear. Two, is the scope of work that's in our packet, this is scope of work drafted here, it has 8 items, and it's a color trail improvement scope of work. Is that the final?
Is that what? I'm sorry?
Is it the final scope of work?
Yes.
Okay. If
we're
it is
approving
the
that
final
tonight,
scope of
too.
work, it seems to me it should be referenced from the memorandum of understanding.
Okay, we can do that.
Well, that's easy. I mean, because,
Yeah, right, just add another-
because you say down below here, approve in the MOU, it says item 5.2, A.2, approve final scope of work as proposed, and I think we already have it. If we don't, that's fine. I just
We
wanted to
do.
be clear. Okay.
Yep.
is that the typical format for a scope of work? Is there anything different? like a form of like a plan, or?
Yes.
I know we saw that last time, and I'm truly not trying to be, I love what you guys are
So
doing.
can I,
I'm
on the
just-
plan,
asking reasonable
on the plan piece, Garland Dorsey has a preliminary plan. They're still trying to finalize all the details on it, and that's why there's no plan with this.
Yeah.
But this is the detail. I mean, this is what they're working on.
I believe you were also given like the GIS
Yes,
overlay map.
yes.
With red and it
Yes,
identified.
that should be attached here also.
The areas were.
Yep.
Just as hard to approve it when it's,
Yeah, I agree, It's both, it's just attachment, it's no big, that's not a big deal, it's paper. The only other thing that, and it's just really for the benefit of Coastal Mountain Land Trust, more so than the town of Camden, in my opinion, and that it talks about termination without cause and 15-day notice. That seems like could stick it in somebody's ear if you wanted to. I don't, if I was them, I wouldn't like that.
That was their idea, that was not ours.
Hey, and they
So we can go to a
volunteered. Okay,
45-day notice or a 30-day notice if you're
That's what I
fine.
would, that's what I would
I mean, I don't like
expect.
sticking fingers in people's
But not,
ears either.
nobody's going to, but, and it, by the way, again, it's an MOU, it's not a contract.
hold on, who would we be?
I'll change it to
who would do
30-day.
That would, we'd be doing that with the contractor, or would they be doing that with us, or what's
way.
the 15 days of?
I mean, where is,
That,
general
For term of
provision?
MOU,
Yeah, it's, where is it, Audra?
number 4,
Sentence.
term of MOU.
7?
Last sentence of number 4.
Last,
May be terminated without cause by either party upon 15-day written
yeah,
notice.
that's short notice.
Why does it, what's the point then? So the Coastal Mountain can be like halfway through the project and be like, hold on, what does that mean?
You can pull the rug,
At what point? And
the permit.
the MOU may be terminated without cause by either party upon 15-day written notice, which notice shall be delivered by hand or by certified. What happens if the MOU is terminated?
Well, we're the ones providing the permit in the MOU, and if we pull the contract, we don't have to provide that, we can
Well,
pull the permit.
we'd be co-applicants. I don't think we're getting a permit. I don't think we'll be issuing a permit. Isn't that,
Town would be given the permit.
I don't think so.
No,
This
it'll,
would-
no,
This was
it's
in
a
reference to
DEP
the
permit.
DEP permits.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
We have a permit.
if Coastal Mountain Land Trust is okay with it.
This was Ian's. I can recommend, ask Ian if he would like it to be 30 tomorrow, and if he wants it to be 30, I'll make it 30.
How long is this project? How long is this project?
Take you to do this?
How long is this project?
Weeks?
I would say maybe 10 days to 2 weeks.
Yes. Okay. Then maybe that's why he's saying 15 is okay, I don't know.
But why would, I feel like we're kind of in, once we start this together, we kind of have to keep working together.
Yep.
So why would we terminate?
So the improvements
I
that
don't
we're
think it should be
trying to make,
terminated
I
until.
think it was already voted upon last.
Well, we were like,
correct?
bring us an MOU, like,
MOU.
we're very much in theory, but help us to feel good. Like, when somebody says, I can't believe you're letting them build trails with no, and once again, the town didn't go to the planning board, which is what's been said over and over again. The planning board should really be reviewing these trails, and then I'll say, well, but it was the Coastal Mountain Land Trust. And is that good enough? And to some people, that would be good enough,
So I
and
think
some people not.
the difference may be is that it's improvements to, it's like renovation and
our
improvement upon a
trails.
trail that's already in existence.
To our trails.
As opposed to,
New trails.
Establishing a new trail or creating a new trail on town property, which is not. This is all improvement to existing trail.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
And
is.
a lot of it is improving potential problems to the town's benefit, not just like hardening things off and using proper gravel and proper drainage and
Better slopes.
better slopes and maintenance, so.
okay.
It's not just,
Does it
it's
say
just,
that?
it's not our,
Well, that's your scope of work.
I believe,
That's the scope of work. If you had that, remember if last
but-
time we had that plan
Yep,
that showed it?
yep.
where the
and I
pictures were?
am, in theory, very much in support. It's just when you say widening a bunch of trails, I don't know. Relocate approximately 90 feet of an existing trail section. To avoid wetlands, great. I don't know, it just feels a little bit, I don't know why we would, under what circumstances would the Coastal Mountain Land Trust need to terminate this MOU? Would it have, I'm hoping it would be after the project is done? Not, definitely not in the
it could
middle?
go either
That's
way.
not what that clause is for, though.
What is it for?
In
During the
case
project.
something happens and they need to terminate it in the middle of it, that's what that's for.
That's why you'd have a termination clause. It terminates the, I mean,
Without
it's a
employment
very
contract
short scope of work, keep that in mind, so it doesn't take long to get it done. So by the time you wrote the letter to terminate it, you'd already be done with the work. But, but how it works is, if you've got this contract and somebody hits a financial snag, or somebody, the town says, they're not following the permit, and without cause we cancel it, that's what it's for. It's a way of trying to cut your liability from the MOU. And again, MOU. It's just an
A bunch of
MOU.
half-made
It's just an
trails, and
MOU.
we've terminated and.
Right. But given this, I guess I'd bend a little bit because the scope is so small and the time duration is so short. But normally you probably wouldn't have that in there. If anything, it would be termination with cause for a reason to terminate a
And
contract.
I just want to reiterate, the 1-year time period is
Yep.
just to give flexibility for us for scope of work and
Add-ons.
project planning.
Add-ons.
Correct,
It makes sense. Don't have to redo it again.
correct. Or rush, or come back to you.
No, I get it. I get it. The only time you terminate without cause is because something bad's happened. Somebody's going, there's a financial problem someplace, the contractor folded and ran away with the money, exaggerating, make a point. They got paid up front and they ran away with the money, now what do we do? You're gonna.
So what would we do? I'm just, in that worst case, you're supposed to, it's our job to protect the town against that worst-case scenario, and
Well, the worst-case scenario would be the trail wouldn't get done.
no, I don't think so.
I believe if a contractor folded on you and ran away with the money, well, it's all over. You have to go find some more money to do it.
It's
But the
improvements
town's not
to an
funding.
existing trail too.
Right.
How
I
many
know I keep
trees,
saying that, but
how many trees are coming down?
Hardly any, really.
correct.
I mean, I don't think we have an exact number, but we're not like clearing, keep in mind, how many feet is this? 900 feet?
They're between 50 and 100, under 50, under
Oh, I'd say
10.
Under 35.
Yeah,
Yeah, small.
110 feet of mountain
It
trail.
only plays when you have an egregious, something, but the contractor does something egregious on the site that causes DEP or somebody to go off half-cocked and say, you know what, you
One of
should.
the reasons why I brought DEP out there when we
All
started
met
going down here,
together.
we all met, walked the whole site, talked about the permitting, talked about erosion control, talked about it. DEP was not concerned. They had a lot of concern with the snowball and the issues we had in the past. Ton of concern, right?
Oh, yeah.
And even when we were up there working on, Chris Packard's going to be up there working on the other erosion issue later, maybe this week. They do not have that concern over on this side of the mountain. They know that I'm looking at it. They know that Natalie Marceau from Gartley and Dorsey is looking at it as a third-party inspector. The scope of this project is 910 feet. It's in the forest canopy. And we're really not crossing, there's a couple of small stream crossings that we need permits on. Those are down low, and they're really easy projects. This is not like we're, removing a lot of trees, creating a big
And
swath
also, it's not
of.
new trail.
No,
trail.
it's just a modification. To that,
The snowball trails weren't new trails either,
No.
they were just widened
no,
trails.
to that end, under B5, it talks about engaging a third-party entity to do regular weekly third-party inspections. That is telling me that's Gartley and Dorsey.
Yes,
Correct,
and
yeah.
maybe I can,
I
maybe
After
I
and
can,
during
well,
every
that's what I was gonna say.
rainstorm
Maybe I can do something on the, strengthen that a little bit prior to,
I think you should do it
Yeah.
prior to.
Events.
Well, if it's going to be 10 days, you're probably going to be 2 weeks, but if it's going to be 10 days, you're going to do before, a couple of days in,
Correct.
and
And that's what we're doing now on the rest of the.
it's just smart.
Round Mountain Trail?
Give us some sleep insurance.
And maybe if the Coastal Mountain Land Trust could just be the ones that are liable for any
Fines?
fines for, not adhering to the permit.
Well, they should be, and they should.
It's such a low risk, it shouldn't
Well,
even
they
be
should
an
be, because if Coastal Mountain Land Trust is signing the contract with the contractor, is that correct?
Correct.
Then they are liable.
But we're the co-applicants, so the DEP would come after us and them
All the-
equally.
All the deep pockets.
If it's really low risk, then that would just,
I'm gonna write in,
I agree with you that it's not going to be an issue. I too trust the Coastal Mountain Land Trust. I would,
By putting ourselves as co-applicants, one of the things we were hoping to do was, and I think this is why the Coastal Mountain Land Trust was happy for us to do that. We want to have a higher level of oversight because of everything that's happened in the past.
So, and we only get that oversight if we're co-applicants?
Well, we're, like you said, we're responsible as well.
Right, but
I
that's
think we can have the oversight without being,
liable.
right, like, I mean, it's our land, it's not like we can't oversee.
No, we could
because
certainly
the
do that,
contractor
but I
doesn't
think
answer
this-
to us. It sounds like the
Everybody's making
contract-
sort of a conscious choice that we're doing this project together, and we're going to be just as involved as they are to some extent.
Well, then I guess the
terms of
town
the-
should be signing the contract also with the contractor and,
I'd say in terms of the environment, like the permitting side of it and liaison with DEP and all of, the inspections around it.
but we're going to have none of the authority over the contractor.
No.
So it seems like, why are we giving ourselves the liability without any of the control? I mean, it's a low, I agree, it's a low-risk project, and it's not, but there's no reason it feels like, well, I'm just going to force myself to really pay attention by making myself,
Allison, there is sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you.
In section 5.3, it does list as role of the town to approve contractors selected by Coastal Mountain Land Trust.
Yeah,
the contractor, but not,
You
yeah.
just had said that there was no, that the town
not
wouldn't have any
oversight is what
say
she said.
over.
well, I guess,
So
to
approve the
understand the
final
difference between
scope of
having,
work.
Correct.
we can approve the contractor, but then does the contractor answer to us or just to you? After these, like it's like I tell Audra she can appoint so-and-so as the finance director, but then after that,
We have no responsibility to control the contractor according to the way this is
I
written.
mean, I don't know if I really want to.
I don't either, but I also
Have
don't want the
that.
liability of any fines.
Yeah, can we just clarify that if something goes wrong with the contractor, the
think it's
Coastal Mountain Land
probably-
Trust is responsible for?
I gotta believe it's in your contract with them currently.
Yeah, I think probably in
I'm
the
responsible,
template.
actually, yeah.
Right, in our contract.
Yeah, I'll touch base with, and Ryan will tomorrow, I'll touch base with Ian to see what's in their existing contract language.
Yeah, actually,
Most
ideally,
most contracts have some indemnification clause.
so
so-
ideally, it would be on the contractor and on the
Mm-hmm.
engineers and architects designing it. So we don't have to be doing it. It's be their job to make sure it goes okay.
It's
Where'd you get
probably,
that engineers and architects from?
Jeremy, it's probably just reinforcing B6, which says the Coastal Mountain Land Trust will pay the cost of the contract to complete the approved scope of work. That could be mildly expanded to include,
And any associate.
to include any direct, indirect, or other damages that could occur to the construction. That would, indirect could be fines, could be, any of that stuff that might come out of it, not just construction costs. Think about that.
I'd be fine with either of those scenarios, whatever, if Jeremy, if we want to do we're in it together with Coastal Mountain Land Trust, and
Yeah.
we just make sure that we're holding the contractors responsible. I ultimately think, of course, that's the whole reason we hire them, is to do the work. And that, like Gartley and Dorsey, if they design an erosion control plan that fails, they should be responsible for that, just not us.
Reinforce
I think
6.
you understand,
I
right?
understand what you're trying to say, yes, yes, I do.
You want to be responsible. You?
How about the chairman of the select board?
The vice chair of the select
Okay,
board.
vice chair, select.
That means I'd be out there all the time, and nobody wants that.
I'd love to, if you want to come out to see the scope of work,
Well put.
let me know, no problem.
I suggest you just reinforce that item 6.
That's fine.
It's pretty straightforward.
I apologize if you said this already, but when do you anticipate shovels in the ground?
Either this fall or within that year period, so it all depends on timing
Good.
for the rest. So it's
Good.
this fall or early spring, depending on contractor time.
And if you haven't seen any of the work that the current contractor's doing, you should go maybe take a look at the work
Yeah.
on the other side of them, round the mountain. It's
I'm gonna go out there
awesome.
together.
What's that?
I'm gonna go out there together.
Sure. It's really awesome. The trail outfit, they're out of Turner?
Yep. Off the beaten
Turner,
path.
Maine, off the beaten path. They've done this work, Patagonia, California. I mean, it's amazing.
He's the
And-
chairman of the International Trail Society.
Jeremy, will it work if you tweak it and
He's
bring
like
it
right
back on the 3rd?
What's that?
Can you tweak it and bring it back on the 3rd?
Can I tweak it and bring it back on the 3rd? I suppose I can. When are you guys trying to get your,
We'd like to have that done sooner than that, but.
All right.
right?
All right.
Could you
Yes, yes.
approve this with a condition that Audra and I
Yeah, I would say that as long as you, well, we talked about.
address your concerns?
One is the scope of work reference, which includes drawings.
Include the map, the drawing.
Well, the drawings and the scope of work as referenced from the memorandum of understanding, to reinforce item 6 of paragraph 5B, which is paying for the cost of contractor to reflect something like.
Indirect, direct.
Indirect, directs, whatever, costs related to the project. I think that was it.
And then just
Wasn't
moving forward with.
Oh, also, the change to the third party on, which is item 5B.
Yeah, stormwater, or before storm events.
Yeah, it's got to be,
certain sizes.
weekly is not enough for third-party inspections of that kind of project. It has to be before, you decide how many during and one at the conclusion of work.
Yeah, it'll be something about the size of a storm event, expected storm events.
Got it?
Is the reason we want it sooner rather than later for the permitting process?
Yes, yeah, it is. With those 3 changes, then we could decide to carry this forward.
Okay, we will do that.
Weird to be like, well, include this thing that we can't see now.
I
I'm
know,
really
I-
not trying to be difficult.
No, I know you're not. I know you're not. I'm gonna have,
think
on the
you
other
raised
hand,
some really good
I don't want to hold
concerns.
out the permit either, you know.
They need this MOU signed in order.
In order for them to apply for permits with DEP.
Right.
This was part of the conversation we had with DEP.
Right. What we could do is make an approval to make these changes, and approve it with these 3 changes, so that they can sign it and go forward, getting that permit application, we can re-review it on the 3rd for any other changes.
We can nix this thing in 15 days if we want.
Exactly.
Start over,
On either side.
so.
What we should
So
do.
we can like do the patents, we can like tell DEP, here you go, we've got this whole MOU, and then they bring it back and we can be like,
That's not a
no,
good look, is
we're gonna
it?
redo that. Could we make changes to the MOU after that?
Sure.
Sure.
Absolutely.
So MOU is
it would be
understanding
above
between us
bar?
and the town.
Nothing to
It's
do with
not-
DEP.
Nothing to do with
They
DEP.
just, DEP needs to know that we have an agreement, a memorandum of understanding for the
Right,
permit.
and it's not a contract.
If we keep the
care what's in
memorandum of understanding, they only want us to have it for a brief moment in time, and then.
MOUs are not, they're not contractual. So I think we should make those 3 areas of change, and get it moved forward so that the Coastal Mountain Land Trust can make the applications and provide the final draft to us at another
Sure.
date.
I will make sure I tweak this so that you're happy with this, so that I'll bring it back on the 3rd. If you can,
We would make a motion to approve it now with those 3 areas of change we mentioned to be modified by you all.
it's fine by me.
I thought we were bringing it back after they got there.
No, when we have to approve something, we have to sign.
Yes.
The town
Well,
has to sign
it's
something.
Audra who's going to sign this.
Right. She's going to sign this with these 3 modifications that we're talking about, and then we'll have it back on the 3rd if we'd like.
And then at that point,
At that point,
if
if
you
we-
guys don't like
We
it,
can make another
we
change.
can make another change, and they're going to have to live with that new change.
Right. Right.
Agreeable?
Yeah, we can always talk about it.
So moved.
As long, can I, I'll give a second and then I'm gonna discuss
Is there
something.
any discussion?
Sure.
Thank you,
discussion.
Chairman, through the chairman. This is, it's totally above board, to do that, what you're suggesting on September, if
Hell yeah.
we need to change something. It's not, it feels a little
It's
like,
n-
it's a little seedy.
I don't know. I mean, I think you're actually
all the time.
protecting, you're adding more
Okay.
protection.
And to be
On
perfectly
the 3rd.
comfortable to work on town property, we felt the other way, like, well, we don't really have a green light one way or the other.
Okay.
And we've tried, Snowball, we've tried it through Jeremy's office, and that's why we're here
Yeah.
tonight.
Okay.
If this were a contract with financial implications, it would never go that route. But we're doing an MOU with clarifications, and we can always change it. It's a memorandum of understanding. It's what
Not a
we,
contract.
it's what we believe we're each going to do. It doesn't require you to do any of those technically.
Okay, now I,
So, right, so really, we're all liable anyway, and
It's true.
yeah.
You could do this project without the
Nothing really
MOU.
matters.
We could do this project without the MOU, actually, but, so with that said, all those in favor of that motion? 4-0. Thank you so much for listening to all this.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Favor? 4-0. Thank you, gentlemen.